2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I love having a generational quarterback around here. I'm losing my mind. I'm talking about Michael Jordan while I'm wearing Michael Jackson, Lamar Jackson Thriller shirts. That's Mr. Jackson if you're nasty. This guy has known me from way back in the day. I read his work when I was a kid. It always embarrasses him. He's not as old as you think he is, but he's old enough to know better. He's out in St. Louis where they took his football team for the second time, those rat bastards. But he is from the fighting city of Philadelphia and brotherly love. He still loves baseball. He covers football. No one does it better. The H-Man, and you can follow him at HBalls or 721 in St. Louis, Missouri. And the Hall of Fame and all over Sirius and XM. We welcome Howard Balzer back on. Balzer, first things first, man. It's fun, it's good, it's all that. But I just want to.
I got to give you a first things first.
Go ahead.
You said I'm not as old as people think, but I was. You mentioned the high school thing, so or the area. I've got to mention it because last month I was in Philadelphia for my high school's 50th reunion, and it was quite a blast. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
How did I know your name first? My dad bought Football Digest, and he bought Sporting News, religiously. He got really pissed in '81. I love to tell this story because I worked for Sporting News Radio back when I knew you 20 years ago. My dad canceled the Sporting News subscription because of the baseball strike in '81. He had to take it out on somebody, and he took it out on the Sporting News. Were you Sporting News, or were you? What were you? You were all the above, or am I losing my mind? Because I remember your name when I was a boy.
It was Sporting News, and I will say this.
What year?
Well, I started there in 1978.
There you go. I was 10 years old. There you go.
Yeah, and I started writing the football column for them the following year in 1979 when I convinced them that we needed to be doing more football in the paper. And what's interesting, you mentioned the 1981 strike, because when the strike happened, all of a sudden we realized at the Sporting News that, hey, what are we going to do for content with all these team reports and stuff we had? So they came to me and said, hey, do you think we could do football reports more regularly? I said, of course we can. Of course we can.
Well, they were the baseball Bible, right?
Absolutely. And a quick story is that back in, it might have been 79, it might have been 80, I had suggested to the Sporting News, the powers that be, that we do a football magazine, a preview magazine, which back then there was hardly any of them. I think maybe Street and Smith, and that was about it. And so they bounced it around. They said, nah, we don't want to take the chance in doing that. Well, then I played a little psychology, and I said, okay, you don't want to do football. I understand it. Why don't you do one for baseball? I mean, that's just as obvious. Do a baseball preview magazine. And so they said, oh, that's a pretty good idea. So they decided to do it. It was so successful that then led the way to do one. Okay, now we feel good about it. Now we'll do one for football. And they did that for years and years and years. Of course, there's a lot fewer of those that are out there.
Well, they also put Lindy's and Athlon, everybody else into Biz Street and Smith. I mean, it became an industry around.
I'm with Lindy's now, and I went to Lindy's after leaving the Sporting News. So, but it was interesting that that started, like you said, probably a lot of other publications doing those. And man, at one time, like there was so many of them that. Right now, there's still many fantasy ones, but not as many as just the general stuff.
Howard, I probably read when you were writing about Steve Grogan and Burt Jones in 78, 79, 80, and then, Randall Cunningham came along before that, Steve Young, and there were running quarterbacks or quarterbacks who had better jets. Certainly Steve McNair terrorized the Ravens. Cordell Stewart terrorized the Ravens. There were movements for Wildcats. There was Michael Vick. I mean, we go through the generation of all of this, and I even said to Clark Judge the other day, I said, hey, where were you the night that Randall Cunningham got hit in the knees, bounced back up, and ran in? I was a season ticket holder for the Eagles during those years because they took my Colts, right? So I remember being in Ruggerio's in East Baltimore, right on Eastern Avenue, right on Taco Monday night, watching that play. It was 32 years ago, whatever it was, right? And we're still talking about that. I think the Lamar Jackson thing on Sunday, the minute it happened, I said, that's an instant classic. Harbaugh was talking about it in the aftermath. And then I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning in my hotel room in Covington, Kentucky. And I know you know what that feels like, Hal. And all the channels, every segment had it and was talking about it, and every 12 minutes it was like on a loop because nobody's seen anything like it. It really is kind of crazy, right?
Well, it is kind of crazy, but it's funny you mentioned Michael Vick because I was looking through my little notes here when with NFL Network has had the 100 or the 100 greatest plays that they unveiled in this long series, and Michael Vick's unbelievable run, and I forget the year it was in that top 100. I'm trying to look at my list real close to see what number it came in at, but there was some that he had certainly that rivaled what Lamar Jackson did on that run, yesterday, and so on Sunday, and so that's that it's every time something happens, oh, that's the best one ever. That's the best one ever. And then all of a sudden you start thinking, say, well, then there was this one, and then there was that one, but
when you can count them
phenomenal.
on a hand or two, though, literally, right? I mean, when you start to call him a video game and then he delivers on it. Look, nobody saw that play happen in real time. I was at the stadium, right? There were 14,000 people in the stadium, maybe when the game started. There were less than that because of the score, and it then just becomes this highlight that gets shown over and over again because it didn't happen in some playoff game. It happened against an 0-9 team in a 40-point game, right? But it's still memorable nonetheless because it's unlike anything else we've seen a quarterback do. And then there's the promise of, oh, yeah, he's on Monday Night Football next week at the Memorial Coliseum, where I've been watching football 40 years and have never been. So I'm really looking forward to that. And there's Deshaun Watson this week. It feels like there's a show around and there's a test not named Russell Wilson and Brady because he passed those tests, right?
Well, no, he's passed the test so far. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. I go to the Bill Parcells school just a little bit in terms of the generational stuff and all that, because Bill Parcells says, "Oh, let's not put him in the Hall of Fame yet," but because that you have to stand the test of time. But he is certainly on that path. But the key is, like those other ones that you threw out and mentioned, Michael Vick and others. Hey, Robert Griffin. He might not have had plays like Lamar has back when he was a rookie with the Redskins, but he was the next one. And every time a guy like that comes along, and then this is going to change the NFL now. Everybody's going to be getting these guys. Well, the reality is sometimes they do get hurt. And it does seem like Jackson has this ability to avoid that. And like Russell Wilson in Seattle. But Russell Wilson doesn't run as much as he used to. And again, I'm not comparing the athletic ability or any of that, but Russell Wilson ran it a lot for the Seahawks, and then he started getting banged up, and so he doesn't run it as much as he did.
Well, look at where we are with Cam Newton in his career, right?
Yeah, well,
I mean, look at where we are with the Indianapolis Colts franchise, and the Carolina Panthers franchise when this is where you are. And Joe Flacco looks to be, getting toward the end of the physical ability to do this. Even Matt Ryan looks like his window is going to close with a 21-3 lead that was never closed. You look at who's going to win Super Bowls. We're looking at the front of this, right? And saying, where is the future and how do you scheme so maybe he doesn't take blunt hits the way they did this for Manning and Brady for a generation, right? That in the game of violence, find a really violent hit on Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. It's hard to do.
Well, it is, but of course they didn't run the ball, and they didn't put their body at risk as much as some of these guys. Now, you're always going to have a chance for injury. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has had some injuries in the last few seasons, but for the most part he does move well, but he doesn't run a lot and then go down the field with those runs very often, and so that's a thing here. So I always caution. Let's not say that this is the start of something huge. I mean, he's special. There's no question about it. But again, you still have to stand the test of time and make sure that you're on the field. That's the key, and he's been able to do that so far. But it hasn't been that many games yet. He's done it. I guess he's close now to 16 starts.
He's 13-3 as a starter. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's right there for basically the equivalent of one full season in the National Football League. So again, I'm not. Believe me, I'm not trying to douse this or to try to downgrade it at all. But all I'm saying is, it's standing the test of time and staying healthy. And that is the key for any quarterback. We know that any quarterback can get hurt at any time. But obviously, the more you run, the more you put yourself at risk. I mean, look at Cam Newton. Cam Newton, and he really wasn't that much of a runner, but he's big. And he's strong, and he still had injuries. And look at the injuries he's had, and who knows if he'll play again for the Panthers, where we are right now. So it's always interesting looking at this whole quarterback position and see what it's going to be. But I don't think we'll ever see the day where it's going to be all these running guys. I mean, hey, look at the guys. Look at the guys who've been drafted high in the last couple of years, the Daniel Joneses and the Sam Darnolds, and the guys coming out, this year. They're throwers. They're passers. For the most part, they're not runners. And so I think that'll never go away, and teams will always be intrigued by guys like this, and then will always cross their fingers. The coaches will always cross their fingers every time he takes off and runs. And, Steve Young, you mentioned Steve Young. Steve Young ran a lot when he was young, and Bill Walsh got him out of that and said, hey, I'm not saying don't ever run, but you still need to go through your progressions. If you're going to be this high-level quarterback, then you have got to do it, mostly staying in the pocket, go through your progressions, then take off. Don't take off too soon. And basically, Bill Walsh made Steve Young into a Hall of Fame quarterback. So that's what's always interesting about this discussion about these different type of guys.
Howard Balzer joining us here from BalzerFootball.com. You can follow him at hbalzer721 out on Twitter, as well as at Sirius and XM and Lindy's in St. Louis, Missouri. I got to tell you, the Seattle trip that we took, we went to Hawaii after that, and I know you had covered some Pro Bowls over there in your day, and I got to see the stadium in Honolulu and Pearl Harbor and all of that stuff. But the Seattle trip, I had a choice of stopping in the Chicago airport and transferring planes or the St. Louis airport. And because of you now have me addicted to the custard out there, that I had to stop and get a little Ted Drew's custard there in St. Louis. So Howard is from the fighting baseball city of St. Louis, Missouri, but watching Lamar, yeah. You've covered this a long time. There's an issue about a general manager or a college scouting director or an offensive coordinator or a head coach selling it in the halls of their team to their veteran players, to ownership, that we're going to have a running quarterback. We're going to move our entire franchise behind this player in this way. It's never been done before. We've never won a Super Bowl in that way. But this is what we're going to do instead of trying to draft for what everyone else in football does, which pretty much comes from some sort of school of Bill Walsh, right? And prototypical 6'4", 6'5" quarterback, pocket passer, got to throw the ball 40 to 50 times a week, got to have pinpoint accuracy, got to read a defense like Tom Brady. Then you got to beef it up. You got to spend $15 million on a left tackle, and you got to have a running back. You have to have all of these parts that make modern football, and then this comes along, and maybe he's in a set of one, as we've heard in the last couple of weeks. But there is a level of courage and sort of stick-it-outness that everyone in the Ravens organization has shown in not only doing this, getting behind this, but then putting a real full commitment into saying we're going to have guys like Nick Boyle and Pat Ricard and Willie Snead be a part of this. Then we're going to draft a Hollywood Brown and hope he's healthy enough to go over the top. That they've put this thing together very, very wisely. So we're going to praise Lamar in all of this, but one of the reasons Lamar is looking so special is everything down to every play design of Greg Roman is designed to let Elvis sing.
Well, no, you're 100% right, but don't. But you mentioned a lot of those supporting pieces. The one thing you didn't mention was the running backs, and that is a huge part of it. We saw what the Chargers were able to do in the playoff game last year, when you could make the argument that the running game wasn't, that they weren't worried about. Now Mark Ingram is added to the mix to go with Edwards, and so now when you have the running game, you have some pretty good receivers. You still have to have that offensive line because the running game doesn't work without that line. And then you've got Jackson. So now all of a sudden the defense is, I'm not going to say powerless, but they're in a tough spot in terms of saying, okay, who are we keying on? Who are we accounting for when there's more people to account for in that offense? And that's where you find the openings. That's where you find the holes. And when you have that guy like Jackson, okay, this breaks down, that breakdown, it didn't work. Okay, boom, he's going to find that opening. And so that's what makes this defense so difficult or this offense rather, so difficult to defend. But without the running game, if the defense wouldn't care if he was going to pitch it to hand it off to somebody because they're not worried about a runner, all of a sudden it's a whole lot different for the defense. So they have done a very good job of putting together looking like all of those pieces that can take advantage of everything and make it very, like I said, very difficult for the defense.
Here's Howard Balzer, and we are talking Ravens football in the aftermath of, a beautiful play. It's a beautiful time. The purple flamingos are on the lawn. Deshaun Watson is coming to town. He's out on Sirius XM. I would think the Lamar quotient has gone up there for a conversation, I think, for the whole league. And in the aftermath of seeing the play now and the spotlight and national TV and all of that that's coming on to this. Howard, a year ago, the thing I discovered when this thing looked like a Navy offense, I said it looked like the old magnetic board game, right? Like where you literally you just turned it on and everybody just sort of it looked like a rugby match. This is obviously a lot more creative. Three Heisman Trophy guys out on the field all at the same time. But the thing that still strikes me, and it struck me against an 0-9 team on Sunday in Cincinnati, is how many times you look up and you're in 2nd and 2 or 2nd and 3 or 2nd and something good. And I've told this story a little bit that we even get greedy around here. I mean, Joe Flacco was never in 2nd and 2 or 2nd and 3. Joe Flacco was in 2nd and 14, 2nd and 10. If they ran the ball pretty good, 2nd and 7, right? Like that's just the way. Or he was in 1st and 10 because he completed a pass, right? But we're not used to this. And last week, Ingram broke off a 5-yard run, and we had some groans up at 5:13 at the home game. And I'm like, you guys don't like 2nd and 5? 2nd and 5's not good anymore, right? That's not good enough. And it really is amazing when you're operating out of 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3, not just because you're good enough to make that happen on 1st down, but you're good enough to continue to move the sticks. It is such a heart eater, you know what I mean? It like eats your heart like a worm when you got a 9-minute drive in the 4th quarter and you can't get off the field,
right.
And they're not even thinking about it in terms of getting 10 yards in 3 plays. They're thinking about it in 4, because they're going to go for it anyway. So it's just a different analytic. It really is, right?
No, it really is, and you use that word. You use that word there, creative, which we hear a lot. I hear it a lot, and it's a lot easier. I go back to what I was just talking about, this entire offense. It's a lot easier to be creative and to do this and to do that when you have the players to be creative with. And I was making the comments yesterday as I'm watching the Rams game, a team now that has gone, I believe it's either 16 or 17 possessions without scoring an offensive touchdown. And I'm saying, ooh, what's going on with the boy wonder? What's going on with the greatest creative play caller in the history of the NFL that other teams are hiring coaches just because they worked for Sean McVay or because they knew him? I think it was Arizona maybe when they hired Cliff Kingsbury, they actually put in their press release that he knows Sean McVay. Oh, that's a good reason to hire a guy as a head coach. But my point being is that all of a sudden, with an offensive line right now that the Rams have, they're 5-4. That's a shell of itself compared to what it was for the last 2 seasons when none of their offensive linemen that started the season missed a start during 2 regular seasons, except for the last game of 2017 when 4 guys were arrested because they had their playoff seeding clinched. Now all of a sudden they've had injuries. They lost 2 guys and one guy retired and they lost another guy in free agency. And all of a sudden, you can't be as creative because the quarterback's not being protected as much and the running game isn't working as well. And all of a sudden, you're not the same offense. So that's all everyone loves to extol coaches and coordinators, and they deserve it. They work hard. But you can only if you don't have those players to make all those schemes work, then they're not going to work. And that's what the Ravens have right now in being able to do all these things with all these different pieces that, like I said, makes it very difficult for a defense to defend because you're going to have an opening somewhere. You can exploit a weakness on the other team's defense with your play calling and with your players when you have enough players to be able to do that. And that's what it's looking like the Ravens have right now.
Howard Balzer joining us here. He is H Balzer. He's out on Sirius and XM and doing. There's a whole other league outside of Baltimore. I know it's hard to believe, but there's more going on than just Deshaun Watson this week. Boy, I had a real nice, time, quite frankly, being left alone in a Covington, Kentucky hotel room and watching the Steelers and the Rams go at it. And I've said the Steelers are like snakefish; they don't go away. You try to squash them and you can't. They keep coming back. The rest of the league is also interesting. We're going to see Buffalo in a couple of weeks. What's going on with Indianapolis and this big surprise for the New Orleans Saints the other day and the Packers in the snow and what's up with Kirk Cousins in the Minnesota Vikings. The NFC's got a bunch of really interesting teams, and I think the AFC feels like an easier path to navigate to some degree, especially with the Chiefs going the other way.
No, I agree with you. And, it'll be interesting to see about the Chiefs the rest of the year because that defense still has some issues. And I believe that I think they're a different team running the ball. And, this Damian Williams, he's a nice little back, but he's not Kareem Hunt. And this team wasn't the same team offensively after Hunt left. And so, or they released him last year. But you're right overall with your big picture comment that the NFC does have a lot of teams that you could make a case for whichever 6 teams make the playoffs. And we include Dallas and Philadelphia and Minnesota, which did a great job against Dallas, and Green Bay. And I don't know if Chicago can bounce back, but you have, I still think New Orleans is really good, but they've been struggling a little bit lately. Then you still have Seattle, and you have San Francisco, and you have the Rams if they can, turn it around a bit. So I think that whatever 6 teams make the playoffs in the NFC, you could make a case almost for just about any of them, winning those necessary games and getting to South Florida for the Super Bowl. And so, who's ever playing well at that time, who's ever the healthier, that's going to be pretty tough. Whereas in the AFC, like you said, I don't see as many teams that are truly capable of being, quote, winning a big game. Maybe going into Baltimore to beat the Ravens or going into New England to beat the Patriots. Kansas City I still think is interesting to watch, and maybe Houston. But beyond that, I think it's there's a lot of question marks right now in this overall conference.
Well, there'll be a different judgment of the Ravens if I talk to you 3-4 weeks from now, right? I mean, temperature changes a lot when Deshaun Watson comes in. You get on an airplane, go out and see Jared Goff despite their issues, and then they're going to see San Francisco come in here, right? I mean, this is really an interesting time for them to go 2-1, to go 1-2, to go 3-0, right? Like, I think things will change dramatically in the next couple of weeks because there's no more, we're going to roll out the JV in Miami or here the Bengals come or whatever. And they still have Cleveland and Pittsburgh way down the line. They're going to see Buffalo before it's over with. But these next couple of weeks, no one's got a tougher road before Thanksgiving than the Ravens in these 3 matchups.
Well, and what happens down the stretch, too, is there's more division games. All throughout the league, and that's the way the league likes to schedule it. And so, yeah, it's not a gimme run for them. You just have to keep going out there and doing what you're doing. I'm as impressed with. There's so much talk about Lamar Jackson. I thought going into this season that the bigger questions with the Ravens was the defense, and that defense has done a really good job. And they've made some key acquisitions that have helped, and so that's shaping into still maybe not as great as it's been, but still a pretty good defense which can help support that offense. And so they're a team right now that you look at the Ravens and say, hey, win some key games and you get home field or at least one of the byes, and then you're in pretty good position because that's a team I think as we saw once with New England already. That's a team. Doesn't matter where that game would be. I think the Ravens would still give the Patriots even in the playoffs a heck of a game if there is a playoff matchup. So that could be one like the ages that we've seen those Ravens and Patriots play in the past when they've met in the postseason.
Well, we'll have plenty of gas on the bus to run everybody up to New England if the game happens to be up there, and looking at their schedule and our schedule. Last thing for you, I mean, you sort of skirted by something to say they've made acquisitions and they've done things. And again, it probably does go back to Eric DeCosta as an Executive of the Year kind of candidate. We have Josh Bynes joining us on Monday night at Adams Jeep. We're going to be back up in Aberdeen talking about the Super Bowl that he was a part of here 7 years ago, and being drafted in from Auburn, and then going on this pathway where he couldn't get a job. Him, LJ Fort comes in from Philadelphia. They give him money. Then they make this move for Marcus Peters. I mean, no one's been more adept in the last 8 weeks of changing the defense, changing the room, dealing off Kenny Young, quitting on guys that weren't good enough, and then having the likes of Tony Jefferson walking around on crutches and sort of still dusting themselves off after C.J. Mosley and Terrell Suggs and Eric Weddle and Zadarius Smith, and saying, hey, still going to be top of class, and we're still talking about them as a playoff team, but there has been a lot of change. Really a tribute to Wink Martindale, I think, in the entire organization to find these parts for this defense.
Well, you just said it, entire organization. Everyone always wants to give credit to one person, which is always a dangerous, thing to do. And, the transition to DeCosta, as you mentioned, has been very good. I'm sure Ozzie whispers in his ear a little bit here and there, and I don't know if he's ever totally going away, but he obviously learned from one of the best that there is. And, I remember, I forget who it was that once said to me, we're talking about free agency and this, and when sometimes you overpay to keep somebody. And he said to me, there's very few gotta haves, and you have to be careful with that, because when you've had a guy for a while and you've had some success, and all of a sudden that guy's looking at other deals, and you feel, oh, we got to have him. We got to have it. We got to do what it takes to keep him. And you look at the Ravens over the years, and I don't know if there's been too many of those got to haves. The true got to haves they made sure to keep, but they were always confident in their own ability to find players, and that's the key, that if one of those guys leaves, well, you've got to be able to replace them. And that's been the downfall of many organizations when they haven't done a good job of replacing really good or good to really good players when they went to go somewhere else. But the Ravens just, hey, okay, you're gone. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. And overall, it doesn't mean you're in the playoffs every year. Doesn't mean you're in the Super Bowl, obviously, every year. No one does that. But you're in the hunt, pretty much every year, unless weird things happen. And that's pretty clearly been what the Ravens have accomplished over this long stretch of time, especially under John Harbaugh.
Now, you just said nobody does that. Yeah, they do. The Patriots do that. It pisses us
all
off.
True.
Yeah. Howard Balzer's here.
Very few.
From Sirius XM as well. You can find him, hbalzer721, and balzerfootball.com, and anywhere the great game is played, and the Hall of Fame stuff coming up here soon as well. Howard, always great to check in with you. It means our football team's doing well. I hope our paths cross between now and Miami, and I hope we're having some frozen custard next summer watching a baseball game, all right?
Sounds good, man. Always enjoy it. Take care.
You got it. Howard Balzer joining us here. Love having him on. You can find him out on the interweb. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. The buy, Toyota.com audio vault, always there 24 hours a day. You can listen to anything you want. Lewis Black's up there. We've got Matt Skura joining us at Jennings Cafe in Catonsville. That's a true Baltimore positive Tuesday night in Catonsville. We got Josh Bynes next Monday up at Adams Jeep in Aberdeen. So we're doing some cool stuff around here, getting ready for the holiday. Lots of cool Baltimore positive stuff with Wes Moore. Thoreau Vignaraja joining us on Thursday at Fadley's at Lexington Market, talking about running for the mayor of Baltimore position. There will be an opening next year. We'll see whether it's who votes and how and why. I'll be talking lots about that at Baltimore Positive, about a little togetherness. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.